Hi everyone. Not a lot of people really know who I am or remember me, and that's okay. My name is Matt. I used to have a YouTube account. First, as this one, I'm Matt O'Neill, and the one I had after it was Apostatism. I was a graduate student in a theology program when I left. I now have my graduate degree in theology, obviously. I worked in education the last 3 years. I was a teacher, and I have since published 2 books, one coming out this November, a third one coming out next year, all on the subject of theology and secularism. You'll actually find videos for the first 2 books that I've published here on the site. The title has changed. It's called What the Bible Really Does and Doesn't Say About Sex. So I'm doing this as a part to sort of do a little more work in education, in the field that I'm passionate about and want to do more in theology and secularism specifically. And so I'm going to read you a blog post. You can read more of my blog posts at Patheos under Danthropology. But so here goes sort of my introductory post. This is a bit out of season. I did this around the time of Christmas. But it's going to be a good little introductory level, and we're also going to start talking about the origins, or sort of the beginnings, if you will, of Christianity. Though it's not really the beginnings. Anyway, so at the time of writing this, Kirk Cameron had just put out his movie called Saving Christmas. And it was a fictional movie, but one that was set up to put the emphasis back into the reason for the season, so to speak. But it didn't help things that Time magazine had stated that it was the worst movie, not one of, but the worst movie of all time. So there are only 2 passages in the Bible that actually talk about Jesus' birth, and I'm not stating reiterations of other sections. I'm stating that only 2 books, Matthew and Luke, narrate the birth story of Jesus, and these are marked by a few important features. Those are that Jesus' mother was a virgin when she conceives and gives birth to Jesus. She remained a virgin, or whether she remained a virgin is a topic for another time, but Jesus' birth is alleged to have happened in Bethlehem in order for him to fulfill the claim that he's the Messiah, that Judaism anticipated and that he would come from Bethlehem, as well as being a descendant from King David. Jesus' birth is supposed to have been marked by a bright star in the sky. 3 magi are alleged to have followed him, and there's also a story of a shepherd, or shepherds in Luke, who had the birth announced to them and went to meet Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Mary's husband. Our earliest sources of Jesus' life and ministry, those in Paul in the Gospel of Mark, say nothing about a virgin birth. Paul does mention that Jesus was born of a woman, but says nothing indicating at all that it was a virgin birth. Even if all our sources made claims of a virgin birth, Jesus would not be alone. Origen, in the late 2nd, early 3rd century CE, wrote about conversations he had had with another historian called Celsus. In Origen's writing titled Against Celsus, he said of the philosopher Plato that he was not born the son of Ariston, who was Plato's father, but of a visionary figure who came to Amphictyon, Plato's mother, in the form of Apollo. Ariston was prevented from having intercourse with Amphictyon until she had brought forth the child which she had had by Apollo. This sort of parallels Matthew 1:24, stating that Mary had not had intercourse until after the birth of Jesus. Plutarch, in his Life of Alexander, writing about Alexander the Great, wrote that Alexander was born of Olympias, who was impregnated by Zeus. Suetonius, in his biography of Caesar Augustus, wrote that Augustus' mother was made pregnant in the temple of Apollo when a serpent was sent in and glided out of her. Virgin births were frequent in antiquity and usually designated a person of special status, hence why people believing Jesus to be the Messiah would give him a story of being born of a virgin. A question of when Jesus was born comes up. If we look at the Gospel of Matthew, it says that Jesus was born during the reign of Herod the Great, when Archelaus replaced him after his death, Matthew 2:1. Herod died in 4 BCE, so if we take Matthew as more authoritative, it would appear that Jesus was born then and not at the turn of the century or break into the Common Era. However, if we compare it to Luke's narration, there are some discrepancies between the two. Luke says Jesus was born during the time that Quirinius was the governor of Syria, and there was a worldwide census. Worldwide at the time would have meant more empire-wide, where Roman Empire had control. So there were censuses taken during 28 BCE, 8 BCE, and 14 CE, but none were of the size that Luke writes of. There was also the Edict of Augustus during the rough time frame we know when Jesus would have been born, but it would have been a census to compile lists of Roman citizens, and Mary and Joseph would have been excluded from this. We do know that Quirinius was a governor authority in Syria on 2 occasions, from 6 to 4 BCE, which would parallel Matthew's account if we go by that, and from 6 to 9 CE. When a census did happen, oftentimes it was for tax purposes, and under Herod the Great's rule, there were no Roman taxes imposed on the citizens under his watch. And the taxes were put on the citizens he would end during times of economic hardship. Even after he died, Archelaus continued the ban of Roman taxation under the territory that Herod had been responsible for, as Josephus writes in Antiquities of the Jews, 1727. However, once Archelaus was removed from power in 6 CE, they did conduct a census for new tax systems that they needed to put in place, as they had created a new province named Judea. So there was a census, but even then it would not require citizens to move to a territory that their family had come from, as Luke assumes to have happened in order to get the family to return to Bethlehem and fulfill prophecy of the Messiah coming from Bethlehem. Citizens needed to report to the censor-in-chief of the city that their taxation district would have been a part of. For citizens of Nazareth, that would have been Sepphoris. So even assuming that Jesus was born in 6 BCE during the 6 CE during the census, he would make a strong judgment. We can make a strong judgment in saying the account is false and assuming Jesus would have been born in Bethlehem. Even aside from the year, the date of December 25th is not the correct date, if for no other reason than the accounts of shepherds attending flocks during the announcement from angels. Why can we conclude that? Because shepherds would have only had their flocks out between March and November. Even early Christians like Clement of Alexandria, in his Stromatis 121, assumed Jesus was born sometime between April and May. In regards to the star, the account is actually an attempt to use what the authors thought was prophecy along with literary tricks of the day. In using Numbers 24, 15 through 17, it says, "A star shall rise out of Jacob, and a man out of Israel shall be raised up." The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible that both Matthew and Luke we know used, mistranslated some of the words, like man is sometimes translated as scepter or Messiah. However, scepter is a symbol used for King David. This is also seen in Psalm 2:9. It was seen to point to a future Messiah figure. Apocalyptic interpretations looked at this as a sign of a messianic prediction and attributed a star predicting a particular Balaam oracle in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs in the 1st century BCE. Even after Jesus, this was also applied to Simon Bar Kokhba, whose surname means son of the star. Noah in the Genesis flood story is alleged to have had shiny surroundings during his birth, and Moses flooded his house with light during his birth, as we see in Exodus Rabbah 122. Suetonius writes in Augustus 94 that the Roman Senate was warned of Augustus' coming birth in 63 BCE with a star. Pliny the Elder in Natural History 228 wrote that when an important man is born, it was signaled with a new bright star. Tacitus wrote in Annals 1422 that a bright comet that was seen in the sky was thought to tell the coming end of the Emperor Nero's reign, and a new emperor would enter the world. As for the Magi, there are a few things we can know if truly Magi did come, though again it seems pretty unlikely. First, we do not know how many actually came to visit, but we assume that there's 3 because of the gifts that they brought: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These Magi were priests from Persia and known to be astrologers. However, Magi came from Mesopotamia, and the gifts that they offered, frankincense and the myrrh, came from Arabia. They were all symbolic of the Solomonic temple and the royalty that came from the temple in David's bloodline, as well as being used in religious rituals, which we see in Isaiah 60, verse 6, and the Song of Solomon 3:6. So we can again conclude that this is part of the narrative. Part of the narrative is a fictional mishmash of ideas in an attempt to show Jesus as the Messiah and using the Septuagint, or the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, as a means to prove to make a point it never intended to make. And speaking of the Septuagint, it is thanks to this that we now think Jesus was born of a virgin. Aside from the earlier noted birth narratives of other well-known historical figures which would have contributed just as much to the need to write of such a thing, we can see where the authors thought to write that the Messiah was born of a virgin. Isaiah 7:14 reads, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and name him Emmanuel." The words young woman come from Hebrew halma. However, the Septuagint had mistranslated the word as parthenos, which means virgin. Even if we look at the term as a young child being born of a young woman, which Mary would have been either way, the woman being talked about in the Isaiah passage refers to a specific woman that is not Mary. It is a woman during the life of the author that this passage about this passage in Isaiah. It's either Isaiah's wife, which we see at 8:3, or the king of Ahaz, who was referenced earlier in the chapter. However one wishes to look at it, Mary was not a virgin, and the idea of her being so is a much later tradition perpetuated by the Matthean and Lucan churches, and authors having poor translations of the original text. Lastly, like the Luke account, Matthew has Jesus' family escape into Egypt to not be subject to what is now known as the Massacre of the Innocent, where Herod the Great is alleged to have ordered the killing of all the children newborn to age 2 in Bethlehem. There's no record of this having ever happened anywhere during Herod's reign. This is a parallel of the Moses story in Exodus, where all the male children of Israel are slaughtered while in the custody of Egypt. It also provides a reason to have the authors have Jesus' family go to Egypt so that they may fulfill the prophecy of Hosea 11:1. Out of Egypt I have called my sons. Only problem is Matthew changes sons to a singular noun, so it seems it only applies to Jesus. However, in context, Hosea was talking about the people of Israel escaping from Egypt with Moses leading them. This was a story about the collective people of Israel, not a single individual, let alone one alleged to have been the Messiah. Again, lacking historical evidence and seeing parallels in the Hebrew Bible, this appears to be a made-up story. However you want to look at it, the historical Jesus was likely born under normal circumstances, in the small town of Nazareth, where he grew up, right around the beginning of what we now call the Common Era. There was no flight into Egypt, no virgin birth, very likely no magi bringing gifts from a place that was very much out of their way, and Herod likely never heard of this individual. So, Kirk Cameron, perhaps you should consider this all before you make your sequel. For more on these subjects, please check out the book Scripting Jesus by L. Michael White, The Nativity by Giza Vermes, and the New Oxford Annotated Bible 4th edition, 2010, edited by Michael Coogan. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you want to see more of what's going on in my life, check the links below. My Patreon page, if you would like to contribute, it would be greatly appreciated. Check out my books on Amazon, You Say That I Am, Jesus and the Messianic Problem, and What the Bible Does and Does Not Say About Sex, coming from Pitchstone Publishers, November 2015. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to speaking with you again.